and talk with.
Actually, our next speaker is coming from UNICEF, and we will touch a really important topic that actually half of the world currently does not have access to the electricity. And usually children that are mostly affected with things that are supposed to be developing and helping you with finding yourself and your career, they unfortunately don't have access to things that perhaps I had privilege to have access to. So actually UNICEF works with a lot of open source projects that help out people in need and actually gives them some amount of money for them to be able to finance and work on this type of stuff, right? And our next speaker is actually going to discuss about that. So Vipul, please welcome on the stage. And Vipul is joining all the way from Stockholm, from Sweden.
How was the flight?
And because of Lufthansa's strike, it took me 12.5 hours to get to here from Stockholm. So, how is everyone feeling? A little bit of temperature check. You want to stretch? Maybe get up, stretch somewhere. Anyone? Just a reminder.
We can do a yoga session before starting the talk, if you don't mind. We can do yoga, savasana. I don't know how it's called actually. All right. So
I'm figuring it out. Sorry, I don't use Mac often, but okay. How do I extend it?
I believe that if you put the presentation on, slideshow, presenter view, you should. Oh, actually no. Or maybe if you like extending the display.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Stop mirroring.
Yeah, try to stop
there
the
you go.
mirror should work. And now direct the presentation itself.
Screen mirroring. Doesn't matter, Mac, Windows, Linux, it sucks anywhere.
There we go.
All right, so Vipul, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Oops. Perfect. All right, so I'm here to talk about innovation for impact, and I'll also talk about digital public goods. Anyone aware of what DPGs, digital public goods, are? Except if I haven't talked to you about it already. All right, but before that, let's set the context right. As it was just told, half of the world is still not connected to internet. So how do we talk about software, humanitarian free and open source software, when realizing that there are people who still can't access a lot of it? And while there's a huge potential in it, we have to move the needle every single day to working towards it. We also see that a lot of digital solutions found in market are not actually designed and built for solving critical challenges, which children and their communities are going through day-to-day basis. We also realize that while digital progress is happening, it comes at the expense of people who can use the most of it or are often marginalized. People are underrepresented and their voices are not heard, especially youth. We don't really consider youth engagement when developing for something. Their data is not reflected in the model that are guiding their lives day to day on how they are living and how they are accessing information or interacting with digital systems. And even when the solutions do exist, they are proprietary, which often means lack of scalability to the areas where interest of the company does not have it, right? So these solutions become inaccessible to people who could use the most of it. So what we really see missing is the digital solutions and services that are accessible to everyone and that could benefit the most vulnerable. We at UNICEF Office of Innovation, through Venture Fund, are trying to counter it. We are doing this by piloting and developing new solutions that are more accessible, and also bringing in the innovators who are often overlooked. If you look at how venture capital market today is placed, majority of the funding goes to certain markets, certain countries, certain people. Less than 10% of those funding go to women-founded or women-led initiatives. these are some of the inequalities that we are trying to counter here. So before jumping into how we are doing it, let me talk about a little bit myself. I'm open source innovation specialist at UNICEF Office of Innovation. Before joining this, I was open source advisor, which means I would work with a lot of companies which UNICEF is working with, funding, supporting, to do open source better, or do open source at all, right? So make your solutions open source, and then how can you do better in it? I come from engineering background, very much platform focused. I used to develop Fedora when I was working at Red Hat. That was my previous role. And also a reminder, because I often do reminder myself, is I'm a sustainer at Software Freedom Conservancy and also a supporter to OSI. So if you have forgot your membership, go support them, donate. These are amazing organizations doing a lot for open source. So the problem statement that I just talked about. Despite of these challenges, we have seen in past year of our experiences that there is really a great opportunity that exists in accelerating results for children when we look at disruptive technology and how they can affect and influence large number of children and families. And what we have been able to test and scale, they reach more and more children with our donors' generous support. A lot of you may be donating to UNICEF as well, so it goes back to you as well. So thank you. If you think about UNICEF, what we generally do, there is a core work which is very much like medical support, disaster response, education, health, water, sanitization, hygiene. So a lot of work of what core UNICEF does is that. Where we sit as venture fund or Office of Innovation is the top corner of the graph, which is new, unproven technology, known challenges, and are new to UNICEF work. So we are trying to target those. We are trying to invest, work, learn from this upcoming frontier technology on how can we accelerate faster development if we invest earlier. So far, for the venture fund, I'll be talking a little bit more on that, has pooled $35 million, 8 Bitcoin, and 2,527 Ethereum that we distribute. Now, how are we different? How are we just not yet another venture capital? As I already told you, we look at people who need more support. We are trying to make the investment, venture capitalists more equitable. So we are unique in 3 main reasons, right? We do not take any equity. So this is an equity-free funding. It's not a grant because it comes with milestones, things that we need to do, piloting, making things open source. But the biggest thing is it's equity-free. You must be an open source solution to receive the funding. And if you are not open source yet, with the caveat that within 6 months of investment, you will be making all the solutions that has received funding open source. So we are trying to sustain open source, make solutions that work with the mission of what UNICEF does, open source. And then we provide tailored mentoring. It can be from business development, software development, open source mentoring, or product market fit, all kind of mentoring that we provide, including data and security lawyers who can help you exactly tailor your product well. So these are the 3 things that's really unique to UNICEF Venture Fund. UNICEF Venture Fund is also the first and only mechanism in the UN to accept, hold, and disperse cryptocurrencies. And it's really challenging that in some of the countries where we work, because of corruptions, because of bureaucracies, you don't want to lose a lot of those very important money, because it's a small amount of money. As you can see, at the seed stage, we do $100,000. Now, that may be small for Italy, that may be small for Sweden or US, but that $100,000 is amazingly helpful to developing countries where we work. So we do not operate in US or Europe. We work in UNICEF program countries, mostly Global South, right? And it's also unique. As you can see, we have done around 146 investments all over 75 countries. And 81 of them are startups, and we also invest in country office investments where they find local solutions that is very helpful to the local need. 44% of the venture fund portfolios consist of female-led or female-founded startups. We are not happy with it, but it's something. We are moving towards it, right? We need to have balance and, in fact, more female-founded startups. And as I mentioned, things must be open source. The solution must be open source. Our goal is to build communities of local problem solvers. We invest in commercially sustainable, scalable, growing local market. So we fund startups, and we help them validate, prototype, and pilot technologies in different countries. We have UNICEF priority sectors. That's where we focus the most. Like obviously there are a lot of sustainable development goals, but we focus mostly on those that align with UNICEF. So health and nutrition, WASH, as I mentioned, water and sanitization, health, hygiene, education, youth engagement, child protection, social protection, and poverty reduction. We also, when we are looking for a new cohort calls, usually these calls to apply for funding is open throughout, but we also do cohort-based calls. Earlier, we used to do technology-based, so AI, data science-related technology. If you're working on these solutions, apply for it, or blockchain-related things. But now we are doing more and more SDG relevant. So we have an ongoing climate action cohort. We have a mental health cohort coming up. So we are trying to target the sustainable development goals. So I'm part of the review committee as well, and one of my personal interest is seeing where open source has created most impact and the areas where it may not have reached a lot. For education, open source has done a lot right, from Wikimedia to different edtechs. But there are certain SDGs where it might not have reached. So we are looking at those as well. Just a little bit of metrics because it's important to see what we have been able to do so far. So far, we have reached 41.5 million beneficiaries across 6 sectors. Again, 44% portfolio are founded by women. We are really proud of that. 18 solutions are certified digital public goods. In a few minutes, we'll go to what DPGs are. 56 UNICEF country offices are using our portfolio startups. So the one we funded it, we are piloting them and scaling it in the UNICEF portfolio companies, startups. 5 solutions have scaled to 6 to 10 countries. 25 solutions have scaled to 1 to 5 countries, and 8 solutions have scaled to 11 or more countries. And a very important thing to highlight, while representing less than half the portfolio, women-led or female-led startups have reached 58% of the beneficiaries across the portfolio. So they have been more successful for us. Some more stats and metrics here. 80% of our portfolio is generating revenue. 6 of them have got exit in one way or another. 32 companies achieved profitability in last year. And some companies who went on afterwards to raise money, they have raised $27.7 million on the follow-on fundings. Important thing to highlight, only 11% of total third-party funding raised by the portfolio comes from female-led startup, even though the total portfolio makes 43% female-led. So that's something we need to look more at on how do we improve follow-up funding for female-led startups as well. And 88% portfolio companies are active, which means 12% companies were not active. When we look at general VCs, they assume that 90% of them are going to fail, 9% are going to stay good, and 1% is going to make me rich. For us, it's a bit different. We are not looking for money. We are not looking for equity. So what we need is we are more invested in their success because they're aligning with our mission. They're aligning with UNICEF's mission. So yeah, this is just to highlight again, we help these companies. They have seen increased capital raises, portfolio exits, and we also help them deploy within UN and UNICEF ecosystem, which is huge because UNICEF works on a massive scale. We are in almost all countries ever, and the kind of work we do impacts billions, right? So they have an opportunity to get deployment within the ecosystem. And there is always a growth through open source engagement. So we have open source mentors as well. Back in my advisory role, that's what I was doing. I would be working with these companies on how to do open source right. Part of it comes from how to build community for technological sustainability. And that's why we also invest in for-profit companies, not NGOs, because we want to look at long-term sustainability. UNICEF country offices work with a lot of NGOs anyway, right? So this model is different. We are looking at for-profit companies here. Just some numbers, just some metrics for those companies who were able to get an exit. This is not an important slide, at least for this context. But I want to talk about what is our North Star metric. We are funding companies, we are funding startups, but how do we measure our success? One of the North Star metrics is innovation fund as a funnel to digital public goods. I have talked about DPG just a little bit while ago. Let's look at that exactly what it is. So I'll just jump to the definition of it. The definition of DPG was laid by the Secretary General of United Nations in a high-level panel for digital cooperation, where members of the UN alongside with different industry, social and academic sector came together. And their idea was, how can we use digital solutions to achieve sustainable development goal? And then he laid out a definition that you can read here. But I want to break it down into the 3 more important parts. There are 3 key principles to be of a digital public good. 1, open source, of course, right? You have to be open source. Second, you must be advancing one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So how are you going to attain SDG? And the last one is do no harm by design and adhere to privacy and other laws. This is very important because open source software by themselves are not exactly good software. They may have a lot of proprietary and closed dependencies. They may be badly written. They may not be written in a way which takes care of PIIs, personally identifiable information, very well. Or they may not be even secure, right? There are many open source projects which are quoting the archetypes bathwater projects, where someone just slaps an OSI-approved license and leaves it on GitHub to be explored, right? They're not maintained. So what this is trying to do is looking at these open source solutions and how can we add more standards on it that we can make sure it's a good software. Something like 85% test coverage, good documentation, clear ownership, and following all the best privacy and or best development standards in general. But after this definition, the DPGA, a multi-stakeholder initiative, was created to operationalize the DPG definition that was laid out there. Started in 2019, by the way, but started with first 6 members there. As you can see, UNICEF, UNDP, Norwegian government, government of Sierra Leone, and ISPRI, which is an Indian think tank. These were the early founders of DPGA, which is Digital Public Good Alliance. But now it has been growing list, and as you can see, there's OSI, there's GitHub, there's Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and many new countries. The day before, Creative Commons joined the DPGA as well. So more and more members are coming ahead. And this is really good because these countries have a push to adopt more DPGs and DPIs. And that's also the general goal and mission of DPGA is as well, to let people adopt these technologies. So the main goals is obviously increasing the discoverability and sustainability of digital public goods. That's the DPGA's main goal. Institutional support and increase the capacity for their creation and implementation. As you can see, low and middle income countries are our main focus. And if I expand a little bit on the 3 pillars of DPGs that I mentioned, these are the 9 indicators which shape what a DPG is. So it starts with relevance to SDG, on which sustainable development goal, what is your exact target, and how are you indicating you are helping them achieve it. And then it jumps to using the good approved license. Now for software, it's OSI license, right? For documentation, it's Creative Commons. We don't allow non-commercial, non-derivative, but there are others one, because we want them to be a truly digital public good. So we have a list of licenses we approve. We must have a clear ownership to know who to go, who to update, if we have a problem, who to reach out to, or maybe if we are trying to scale it. So clear ownership is important. Platform independence, that's the biggest caveat, and that's also a lot of reason why a lot of open source systems are not eligible. We do not want any hooks. So if your solution, for example, has a hard requirement on some niche AWS solution that it cannot run without, it's not really a digital public good because it cannot be scaled without them. So platform independence and documentation. Rest of them are very much standard and best practices depending on the local laws where your solution is deployed, depending on the local government rules, so they can vary. But in general, the idea is to identify good solutions, digital public goods. So if you have a solution that you think is worthy of becoming a DPG, or you think your solutions being part of DPG will help DPG go further ahead, please do apply. It's very simple. If you go on digitalpublicgoods.net, you have full guide, eligibility test, to also the application form there, which you can apply, and there is a small review that goes ahead. And then once your solution is accepted, it will be listed on the registry. I see I have just 10 minutes, so I want to leave some space for Q&A, so I'll rush through this. We have over 150 DPGs recognized, and there are many reasons on why you should be a DPG. There are even more value propositions coming up every day. DPGA members are always trying to launch new initiatives. There is a work directly going on with national governments, UN agencies, and others who are looking for open source solutions to adopt. One of the biggest value propositions for me, I have said this to a few people today, the amount of money governments, NGOs, and IGOs lose because they don't know a solution that they need exists out there. And if it exists, they can take it and adopt it, is massive. So having a digital public good standards, which is spearheaded by Digital Public Good Association, which every country understands that, yes, we can take it and we can scale it, is massive. So, and also being officially recognized as DPGs would allow both the solutions themselves because of the discoverability, but also the organizations and funders who are committed to supporting the development and implementation of DPGs. With that, I do want to leave some space for Q&A. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the talk. Yes, please.
But can you share some examples of the projects that have been founded and that have been scaled up most successfully?
Oh, yes. So again, many things comes to mind. Let's start with Statvig. Statvig was a company we funded, which is from India. And it's a blockchain-based company for supply chain, your classic use of supply chain, right? But it is scaled to for food supply chains, because UNICEF does a lot of those things as well, right? Where we'll be sending emergency packets. But vaccine, we have invested and distributed vaccines a lot, so Statvig is part of that. We have done Rumsan or Rahat, which is a Nepal company, which is very much about having blockchain-related financing solutions. We have PixFrame, which was scaled up by, I'm trying to remember which country, on all the children who would be learning some skills or game development, but that's also open source. So there are many of such solutions. I would also recommend 19 of the solutions we have invested in are DPGs as well. So going and looking through them. There's one that we supported our country office is called ADDA, African Drone Data and Drone Academy. And the goal of that is to educate people from the local regions to understand how drone works, how to have business around that, and 500 students have graduated from that. And such like that, there are many UNICEF, there is Bebo, an application which is parenting tips, right? And that's very simple, but it's so much needed in areas where we work with. So that's also scaled up and is a DPG. So yeah, I would love to give you more numbers on more exact list of where you can go and find these things. Do check out UNICEF Innovation Fund, unicefinnovationfund.org. You'll see a list of companies, impacts that they have made. Some of the metrics do lie there. Yes?
There is another question here.
Slightly different track, more on the sort of struggles and learning side. So with a lot of the organizations or companies or NGOs that have used open source, which in general is a great thing, could you give some examples, picking out from your experience, I'm not asking for data, about things that they have struggled with when using open source for their solutions as well?
Yes, so the biggest one that I see at the very early stage is the FUD, is the misconceptions of open source. Immediately people jump to thinking that, am I going to give my IP, my code, my well-deserved baby for free? So that's one, right? You need to educate them that it's just a value add-on, and your business where you make money is everything built around it. And open source, the code by itself is a liability, is not exactly your intellectual property. So, and then also highlighting that business inherently is risky. Open source business is no different. So with right education, right understanding, you can succeed in this, giving right examples, showcasing different business models and how different open source companies have succeeded in those business models is very important. But the biggest challenge that we face, and we still don't have quite a very easy answer, is resources constraints. At the early stage, startups and the areas we work with, startups have very clear vision where they want to be, and they want to be there really quick. Cutting corners becomes very easy and often preferred because you don't have to invest as much resources on upskilling yourself, but also time. And resource constraints, they just think open source is going to add a lot of extra work on it. And people who don't understand open source, trying to convince them that, hey, if you work on it really well, it will increase your efficiency. In long term, you'll have better software, so less going back and fixing bad code, and it may be code efficient for you, is challenging. Because they see that right now, instead of just getting the work done, now I have to follow through all the process, right? So resources constraints is one of the biggest challenges that we see.
Other questions?
All right, so if no questions, one of my biggest goal of this is to slowly, as I'm doing policies and I'm doing capacity building of open source within UNICEF, I want to start interaction with community, all the very important need-based solutions that we develop, which are very critical for the areas we work in. I want to see a little bit of the community support for making them sustainable. And the reason I'm here is to hear from you. What would you like to see and how will you like to interact with UNICEF and the solutions we are working with? Because there is no one size fit all, right? We are coming up with different platforms where we can engage, and we are making more and more internal toolings open source and internal applications open source, because we don't have developers internally. We have a few, but they're on consultants and they're on a need-based requirement. We hire vendors to do something. Once the work is done, then what do we do with those solutions? Because they're really important solutions, right? So if you have something in mind, I would love to hear from you. If not, do come and talk to me about how to be a DPG, or if you have interest, if you have a company, for-profit, startup, open source solutions, come talk to me on how to apply for funding, and I would really love to discuss more. Thank you.